Well, if you have burnout, you're hopping a skip away from adrenal fatigue. And if you have adrenal fatigue, you're like probably already have hormone imbalance. And if you have hormone imbalance, you're about to get adrenal fatigue and you probably had burnout.
Are you ready to reclaim your life from exhaustion and expand the possibilities of what life can be? If so, I'm your guide, Evelyn.Energy, work-life geek and engineer-turned-resiliency coach on a mission to redefine how we work, live, and utilize our energy. Each episode, I dig deep with my guests as they share their story, spark, and strategies for developing our own unique work-life blend. This is Engineering Serenity. Episode 3, an herbal approach to balance with Jessica Marcy.
I'm excited to be here.
So, to get us rolling, what is your name?
My name is Jessica Marcy.
What career or industry do you work in?
I'm a clinical herbalist.
Do you like your career?
Now, yes, I love it.
Now I want to ask, what did you do before?
So before, I was a civil and environmental engineer for 10 years, and I worked in construction and project management.
And how many years have you now been doing the herbalist work?
So I started my herbal training while I was still working, and then I started my business in 2020. Then I quit my job in 2021.
Do you have any experience with burnout?
I have a lot of experience with burnout.
Are you willing to share that experience with us now?
Absolutely. When I was in college, I was not as smart as most people are who go through engineering school. I feel like a lot of people can do big numbered math in their head, and I was never that person. So I was very, very determined. So I had to work really hard. So that was one of my first experiences, is that I was trying to work out. Like I was getting up at 5 every day to lift weights and eat healthy and keep up with my classes and have a social life. And it was a lot. And I got a resurgence of mono in my junior year of college. So that was pretty terrible. And that was my first sign of okay, you need to dial it back.
When you had mono in college, did you think, oh, I'm burning out and I need to slow down?
No, I tried to ignore it and keep doing things. And then the doctor was like, you need to stop. You need to slow down. Stop working out. I got all these things that I wasn't allowed to do for a certain amount of time. Then I slowed down.
Because you had to, or because you learned from the experience?
Because I had to. But looking back, now I can recognize those, all the things that were happening. I was so irritable all the time. I was just not nice. My friends were getting mad at me, and it is because I was putting too much pressure on myself. That was a big year of change for me, realizing that I can't do that all the time. I pulled back from a lot of social things. I didn't pull away completely socially. I just made better choices about how I used those hours and when I was using them. Because sleep is incredibly important.
Yes, that is a true statement. You said that the experience in college was just the first of many.
Yeah. As we said, I don't like to sit still. So I kind of hit a wall. I said I was going to take off the last 2 weeks of December. And then I got a bunch of people that were like, well, can you just do this one order? But it was 10 of my wholesale customers. And I was like, yeah, sure. So I was working up to 3 days before the holiday weekend. And then 2 days later, I had a fever of 102. And I was like, and I haven't been sick in 4 years. And I just always attribute it to I'm playing with herbs literally every day. I'm trying them in different ways. They probably just boost my immune system. I'm a weirdo who's super into nutrition and health, and I do all these things. And so for me to get so sick, and at this point, it's been 3 weeks and I'm still sick. I've been to the doctor, I have medicines, I'm getting better. But that was I'm doing it again. I've had it happen before and I still haven't learned my lesson. So for me, it shows up a lot more physically now because I've learned over the years how to deal with the emotional sides better so I don't get quite as irritable and grumpy.
Okay. Are those the only symptoms that show up at this point?
For me, it's also my skin. When I have a cortisol issue, which is, so when you physically have burnout, one of the ways that happens is that you have cortisol dysregulation, which typically means you have too high cortisol because you're probably hitting fight or flight mode too often because you're too stressed out. There's a lot of symptoms that come along with that. You can have dry skin, eczema issues. Waking up at night between 2 and 5 is usually a sign of it. Lots of sugar cravings, that tired but wired feeling, like before bed, you can't get your brain to calm down because you're wired. You wake up and you're either exhausted and can't function without that caffeine immediately, or you wake up and you like have to go run in to do it. Like you have that adrenaline flow immediately. You have a lot of ups and downs and extremes. And I notice those things happening and I can kind of deal with some of them. At this time, I knew it was happening, but I was also like, I don't feel like I have a choice right now. So I just got to push through it. And then my body was like, no, you're stopping.
Congratulations, you're done.
Yeah.
And all those symptoms that you were listing, are there ones that particularly show up for you over and over again?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it was really interesting to learn about burnout from an herbal perspective, because that's one of the main things that I help people with is burnout, adrenal fatigue, and hormone balancing. And as I was learning about it, I'm just like sitting there nodding, going, yeah, yep, yep. Because like all the symptoms, all the things that tie together, I'm like, yep, that's me, just over and over again. And now I recognize them. It's a matter of actually taking action when you recognize those symptoms.
Awareness is the first step. And I think that's a big part of why we're having these conversations. I think in the conversation about burnout, a lot of people have a feel for what are the basic symptoms that they're looking for. But having a conversation about what is our specific experiences, people can get a better feel of how it shows up, how it doesn't show up, how it shows up over a course of many, many years, and those kind of things. A little more practical experience and part of that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
In your herbalist work, did you know that you wanted to work towards burnout and fatigue and hormonal rebalancing? Or how did you end up in this area?
I've been using herbs pretty much my whole life. My husband used to always joke, even in college, that I was a hippie because I would be like, oh, you have an upset stomach? Here's a cup of tea. Like that was just kind of what I did. But then when I had kids, I really wanted to know what I was doing if I was going to use herbs with kids, because they're so precious and so little and get affected by so much so easily. And so I started some formal training. I was also working in environmental remediation at the time, and I found a lot of information about a lot of products, and I wanted to get them out of my house. So I wanted to learn how to make more products myself for like household use and skincare and stuff like that. So it was kind of like a personal interest first. But then as the kids were getting older and as I was learning, I kept wanting to learn more. So I ended up in a clinical training class. And every single one of my friends I was talking to were having burnout or having hormonal imbalances. And I was like, well, you can use this, or well, you can do this. Well, and then next thing you know, I'm like teaching classes because I'm like, it's something I learned and something I knew. And then more people were asking questions and I just kind of fell into it. And I find that I really, really enjoy it because I think women especially have such power to do so much, but our bodies have not adapted to the world that we currently live in. And because we have this cycle, this hormonal cycle that men don't have to deal with because their hormones reset every 24 hours, we are so much more likely to get bogged down by these issues that I feel like if I was going to change the world, this would be how I would do it, by giving women their health back so they have the power to do the things they're meant to do.
Their health back is defined as what for you?
If you're in a state of burnout or fatigue and you can't put the thoughts together, you work yourself into this place where you can't think clearly almost because you're sick or you're tired or you don't have the energy to take on that big task or reach that big goal. And so that's what I want to do, is give people their health, their energy, their vitality. And that seems to be the biggest, most impactful way that I can do that, is helping driven people with burnout and adrenal fatigue and hormone imbalance, and moms. You don't have to you could be a stay-at-home mom and still change the world. So I help them too.
Oh yeah. That's a job that can exhaust you just as fast as anything else in a boardroom.
Sometimes I think more so, because you don't get to go. I know some people are like, well, I take my job home with me, but you don't get to go home and someone's life depends on you as a parent. So
You can't hang up the phone and be like, you know what? I need to step away.
yeah,
Something you can't do as a
you
stay-at-home
can't
parent.
even go to a bathroom with small children by yourself. So to expect to get 2 minutes is hilarious.
So herbalism and getting your energy back, there's so many different avenues to look at. But if you wanted to start exploring or doing some experiment, how do you start to play with herbals? If you've never had any experience whatsoever with it, but it sounds intriguing, where do you start?
So I'm actually working on a book right now called 100 Days of Herbs. And it's for taking small steps into learning herbs and working with herbs. So each day there'll be a small task, but it's really as simple as just starting with a cup of tea. So like if you start using like a chamomile tea, think about how it makes you feel. Smell it beforehand, smell it afterwards, taste it as it steeps, like get to know it on its own, chamomile on its own, like a loose leaf tea. I'm not talking about the grocery store powder. I'm talking about like the plant. Get to know it and then really reflect on how does it make you sleepy? Does it make you calm? Does it make you energized? Does it help your brain focus? Because it's a nervine herb, which means it nourishes the nervous system and it can be a little bit sedative, but for some people it's focusing. So like understanding those things are probably the easiest way to get started. There are also a lot of really awesome herbal books out there that you can start like right on Amazon. Just type in beginner herbalism and 50 will come up. There's 1,000 ways to do it. I also teach classes and I'm working on getting more of those classes videotaped so I can put them on YouTube. But that's a process. We're getting there.
And how do you know if it's a hormonal imbalance versus burnout fatigue? Like, how do you know which roads to start traveling down and exploring? Because I would imagine that something like a hormone imbalance could show up in a very similar way to burnout symptoms. What would be the difference there?
That's why I work with all three. And a lot of people, when I say I work with all three, they're like, that's so many things. And I'm like, well, if you have burnout, you're a hop and a skip away from adrenal fatigue. And if you have adrenal fatigue, you're like, probably already have hormone imbalance. And if you have hormone imbalance, you're about to get adrenal fatigue and you probably have burnout. They're all connected. So they all look very similar. It can be kind of tricky. So I have a 6-week course where I actually walk people through that process of how to figure that out. You have to really dissect your diet, your lifestyle, the choices that you make on a day to day, and see how you feel. Because there are certain practices that you could be doing that could be feeding the hormonal imbalance. And you can also see where you're missing minerals and nutrients, which can also contribute to all of it. And like I said, that tired but wired feeling, that's like one of the biggest like things to show people that they're running on cortisol and adrenaline. So there's a lot of moving pieces. And without like visual aids and stuff, I'm not sure I can do it justice in this kind of conversation to know which one to start with. I think the best thing you can do when you think you have something going on is just start reading about it and like reading books, not just like TikTok or Instagram posts, but read about it and see if you relate to any of the symptoms and then dig a little deeper.
Great. That's a lot of things to think about. And I'm already like, okay, I have to go make friend with chamomile tea. I didn't know it was also a focusing
For
element.
some people, it can be because what it does is it calms the nervous system. And so, like, if you have an anxious, racing mind, it can help with that. And that's one of the reasons why it's also helpful for sleep because it calms your brain.
Wow. There's so many things I'm thinking about right now, and I'm so excited.
I'm glad.
People want to learn more about you, what you do, maybe join one of your future cohorts on balancing the fatigue, hormonal imbalance, and burnout symptoms with herbs. How do people learn more about you?
My website is oldwisdomwellness.com and pretty much everything is there. I spend a lot of time on Instagram. That's just Old Wisdom Wellness. So those are probably the two easiest ways to find me and chat with me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And with that, I want to wrap up our conversation with the 5 final questions I ask every guest. Are you
Okay.
ready?
I'm ready.
What is your definition of wellness?
That's a tough one. um, being at peace with your body and yourself, like mind, body, spirit, if you are happy and at peace with all of those things, then that is where I think wellness is.
Mm. What is your favorite method to recharge during the workday?
I like to take like little breaks. So our bodies have this ultradian rhythm. I probably butchered that. But what it is you have like your energy works on like a cycle. So you have peaks and valleys. When you're really focused and you're doing a great job and things are going, you're at your peak and then it starts to taper off. And as it's starting to taper off, you notice you're not being as focused. You're not doing this. I like to just stop and go make a cup of tea, go for a walk, like even if it's just walking around the house or do a couple squats or, like an exercise, just do something because that actually helps reset the rhythm so you can get back into that focus faster than just trying to push through it.
What sets that rhythm?
It is a little bit of person dependent, but there's cycles that happen in less than a 24-hour period. They're usually about 2 to 3 hours where you hit the low and then the high and then the low again, or 2 to 3 hours for most people. So you can kind of like, once you start paying attention to it, it's kind of easy to see. So like if I start working at 7 a.m. by like 9, I'm like, okay, I need a rest. And then for me, my biggest like time frame that like the longest one is around like 11:30, 12 o'clock. That's when I'm like, I could do this forever. And then the afternoon, they get shorter for me.
And everybody wants snacks.
Yes.
If you could master one skill instantly, what would it be?
Doing math in my head. I still use math a lot. So I can do some basic math, but like if I could do percentages, because when you make tinctures, like alcohol-based tinctures for herbs, you have to deal with the alcohol percentage and you have to combine, or it's a whole thing. And I would love to be able to do that in my head.
What are you geeking out about right now?
I just got a book about psychological nutrition. So how food affects our emotions and our brain on a physical and psychological level. And I'm finding it super interesting.
Now I want to read it.
I can find it.
Would you give me a little bit of information? I'm always like, oh, I want to know everything now.
Her name is Uma Naidu. Yeah, This Is Your Brain on Food is the title of it.
It's a good name. So, final question. Imagine a world where you have achieved the optimal work-life balance. Describe your typical day.
So I really love my work. So mine is going to look work heavy because a lot of the tasks that I do for my job, I really actually enjoy. So I would wake up, I would probably eat breakfast, hang out with my kids for a few minutes, go work out, come home. Probably mornings. I really like to check my email, like get to inbox zero. I have yet to do it, but I'm trying so hard. And then probably blend some teas, hang out with my kids some more. They like they're getting into herbs. They like to try things. So as I'm taste testing herbs and stuff, they'll come in and they'll have some tea with me. Um, and then probably some more like computer work, but my computer work can be making graphics, it could be making classes, it could be doing emails, like it's all over the board. And then I don't know, I'd probably just do that and maybe blend some more tea and keep going and then cook dinner. And then after dinner, read, hang out with the kids, read, and then eventually go to bed.
It's nice. And I love the way that your work is this beautiful blend of like physical tasks and digital tasks. It's not everything behind a screen. There's really some getting your hands dirty and getting into it.
Yeah. And like in the summer, there's a lot more outdoors too, because I grow a lot of the herbs. So like I'm actually like, I can bring the kids outside and I can work in the garden and they can dig in the sand pit next to me.
It's lovely. Well, thank you for the conversation today and the inspiration. Lots of cool things to think about and start to explore more. I'm definitely going to become friends with chamomile tea. And what is the one thing you want the audience to take away from our conversation today?
that even the so-called experts are imperfect. So don't beat yourself up when you're, the person who teaches people how to not get burnout and you get burnout.
Intrigued or inspired by today's episode, but forgot the details? Don't worry, I've got you covered. Visit engineeringserenity.com for a complete summary of today's episode, including timestamps, links, and other resources for your adventure. Wishing you strength and serenity, Evelyn out.